On Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous, I'm joined by Roberta Matuson, author of Suddenly in Charge. We're talking about why Musk's micromanagement won't work. That's very alliterative. How layoffs create hidden opportunities and the power of managing up so you don't end up on the chopping block. If you've got a boss or want to be one, you won't want to miss this one. Let's get on with the show.
Well, howdy, Joseph.
Hi, hello, how are you?
We heard the news,
We're quite enthused.
and the only thing to do
What should we do?
is strum this guitar
And sing to the stars.
and serenade you.
Ooh.
You survived, and that's true. I thought I'd send a little wish to you.
That is some mighty fine fiddling. But hey, let's pick it up.
All right.
That's more like it. Yeehaw!
Play it for Joseph.
All right, now where were we? Okay, you're still standing, and that's pretty great.
Joseph!
You know what? You kicked its butt. It's time to celebrate.
Joseph!
Birds will jingle jangle.
It's time to do-si-do.
So grab yourself a partner and let's see it go.
Cause it's a
Jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there. A jingle jangle inspiration everywhere. A jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there.
a jingle jangle inspiration everywhere.
All right.
Woo, yeah.
That's how you celebrate.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. I'm kind of famous. I'm Jerry Springer. And Jaffe is no host. He'd be lucky to be in my audience, let alone on my show. Well, maybe he's crazy enough to be on my show. I take that back. And that's not a good thing.
I just want you to know I've practiced this word about 20 times to make sure that I did not mispronounce it.
I have a question. Has anyone ever said with all due respect and then not followed up with a zinger?
His side of the bed. If I come in and I'm on the other side, he will move it. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Which side do you like? With all due respect, you make a good point.
Cheery Oreos! Toasted Oreos!
Mute. He's muted.
I love what he's saying. He doesn't need sounds.
You're so small, squishing your head, Joseph.
You can.
Do it with me, Joe.
With all due respect, you really do look handsome, Bruce. Cheery Oreos! Toasted Oreos!
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
How did I do
insane.
that? You just made the intro reel. Yes, you did. You know, that was such a beautiful retrospection for me. Just going back, Roberta and I were in the green room. And by the way, Roberta, that was pre-recorded, which you probably realized because actually her name is Roberta Matuson and not Madison. And I pre-recorded. I'm playing with some of StreamYard's features, which is really cool to be able to set up the show. But anyway, you know, it was a beautiful little retrospective back to March 2020 and just looking at all these memories, all of these, this journey that we've all been on. Certainly when we talk about the journey associated with talent, boy, oh boy, I mean, from the great resignation to the great stagnation to the great deflation to the great, I don't know, inflation maybe going on these days. We've definitely seen all these incredible cycles associated with talent, and we have an expert in the house that is going to tell us all about it. Suddenly in Charge is her book, but more on that soon. My why statement, because, you know, PARTY, because I gotta. As a teacher, facilitator, and coach, I help high aspiring entrepreneurs, owners, and their leadership teams get unstuck, return to growth, and become forever changed. What do I mean by unstuck? Well, I started the show when people were stuck at home, quite literally, or stuck in general. And so the best way to get unstuck is, you know, to, I don't know, a little dose of hope, positivity, and optimism. HBO. It's not TV, it's HBO. Subscribe to the show. I would be very grateful if you did that. As an implementer, as a business and leadership coach, I help companies return to growth. So there's that idea of growing. If you're not growing, then you are stagnating. If you are standing still, you are falling back. And nobody wants to do that, especially in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And finally, forever changed, my sixth and maybe final book that I wrote post-COVID, really about how a global pandemic changed my direction, my purpose, and my life. If we are not changing, and if that destination is not to realize our becoming, our unique ability, as Dan Sullivan calls it, then what are we doing here? We're nothing but space invaders. A little bit of a provocative point, but certainly when I think about talents, when I think about leadership, when I think about bosses, we've got to be able to figure out how to be truly happy and fulfilled in our work lives, because it is such a huge part of our lives, especially when we're working from home in a hybrid or remote environment. Very hard not to take your work home with you when you are home in the very first place. But more on that very soon. Now it's time to mention my little monologue in my seated position, hence seated soliloquy. It's called Boss Man, the man, right? The man with a plan, working for the man. We always talk about how leadership is changing and evolving from chainsaw L. Dunlap, leading and managing with fear and by fear. It seems like that is not completely gone. Maybe we thought it was gone, but at the highest level, perhaps there are still way too many people that would lead and manage through a process of fearing the boss. But let's talk about that. Let's deconstruct that a little bit as well. Often parents are like leaders in some respects, and managers. I'll say to my kids, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. Is that how it should be at the same time, right? I'm not your friend, I'm your boss. Should there be a distinction, a delineation? Should there be clear boundaries and expectations when it comes to understanding where the line is, and not to cross that line when it comes to being a boss? But really where we should be going to is this idea of how to be a great boss. What does it mean to be a great boss? And let's flip it on its head, and let's talk about what it means to be a great subordinate or a great report, a great direct report, a great employee. What does that mean when it comes to managing up, when it comes to being able to actually reciprocate? Isn't it a reciprocal relationship at the same time? It's not only just about your boss managing down, it is you managing up. There are two lines of communication. It seems like we're just scratching the surface when it comes to truly understanding the relationship between bosser and bossee, between the person managing down and the person managing up. But forget about what I know. Let's go to an expert. Let's find out a little bit more about Roberta. For more than 25 years, Roberta Matuson, president of Matuson Consulting, has helped leaders in highly regarded companies like GM, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and Microsoft, as well as small and medium-sized businesses, achieve dramatic growth and market leadership through the maximization of talent. I love this because even in my book, Built to Suck, I spoke about talent resurrection. We need to be able to maximize this potential, this opportunity, this gift, this challenge of talent. She's the author of 7 books, including the forthcoming 3rd edition of Suddenly in Charge, Managing Up, Managing Down, Succeeding All Around, a Washington Post top 5 business book for leaders. Can we talk 7 principles for managing difficult conversations at work and evergreen talent? She knows talent. Roberta is one of a handful of people who have appeared as a guest of Bill O'Reilly's on Fox's O'Reilly Factor and who left the show unscathed. I want to know about that story, Roberta. Did he say, hold on, I've got, for this, I'm going to need a little sound effect, which is, did he turn around and say, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, on your show. I was very fortunate in that two things. Number one, I had never watched his show. So before being on it, so I had no idea that I was being thrown into the fire pit. And number two, he was actually on my side of the conversation. So I wasn't attacked, which is probably the only reason I left unscathed.
Well, I mean, how could he be against you, especially on so many, of these topics? Because it really speaks to a truism, like a universal truth. Maybe it's the dirty truth. Maybe it's it's something that kind of we understand it, but do we necessarily understand the context and the meaning? And even so, are we in fact living and practicing? There's that old saying, which is, it's like teenage boys and sex, right? Most of them talk about it, but not many of them are doing it. And those that are doing it are not doing it well.
Okay.
How's that for a setup?
Well, you did set me up, because my segment on the O'Reilly Factor was about sex in the workplace.
There you go.
And-
See,
and
serendipity.
Little did I know that the producer who brought me on the show 6 weeks later had a claim against Bill O'Reilly about sexual harassment in the workplace. And well, apparently Bill didn't listen to my advice, and we all know how that story ended. So it was a pretty crazy time, both in the studio and after.
I thought you were going to say the segment was on sex in the workplace, and Bill O'Reilly said, yes, please.
I'm not sure what he said. I just know that I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, I'll tell you, by the way, before we continue, the closest I ever came to Fox News was one day I was in my pajamas, in my woolies, and getting into bed when suddenly my phone started ringing off the hook, and people were like, dude, you're on TV. And I'm like, no, I'm definitely not on TV at the moment. And they're like, no, you're on TV right now. And I'm like, I'm definitely not on TV. And I switched on Fox News, and there was a segment where I had Dr. Robin DeAngelo on my show, and suddenly they were skewering the episode and her, and I think they left me alone. But that's the closest, How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. How do you get to Fox News? I have no idea. Be controversial. Well, welcome to the show. We have a little bit of fun here. David Brooks speaks about the concept of eulogy virtues to dovetail with resume virtues. Nobody at our funerals talks about our EBITDA or how many awards we won, but they certainly do talk about our lives and how we impacted others and how we made them feel. So without further ado, this is a little segment I call Two Truths and a Lie. And this, by the way, was all created with AI. So are you ready? Have you brought your best lying ability?
We twist, we turn in search of reality.
All right, we twist, we turn in search of reality. Roberta, we sent our investigators into the field to find out about your deep and dark and sordid past. You came back squeaky clean, but we did manage to find the following about you. First of all, we found out that you've traveled around the world for a year solo when you were 29 years old. So there you are as Carmen Sandiego. So tell us about, I don't know, Phineas Fogg. Tell us about around the world in 365 days.
Well, it was fascinating. It was wonderful. When I left my job, I was living in Houston, and I left my job. I just decided, I just got my MBA, and I'd had enough, and I was pretty done. And I said, the one thing that I would never regret when I was sitting in my rocking chair at the ripe old age of whatever is the biggest mistake I've ever made was traveling around the world. So I packed my bag and I literally hopped on the plane and I went, and it didn't come back for a year.
All right. Favorite country, least favorite country?
That's really hard because each country, there was something different about each country. So I really didn't have a favorite. I mean, it was just an overall amazing experience.
All right, we'll have to we'll probe a little bit harder and find out exactly which country will be allowing Roberta back, giving her gold card, and the other one won't. But what we also found out is, I've only just gotten into coaching. For the last year and a half of my life, I've been business and leadership coaching. But you have been coaching since you were 5 years old. And so that is AI's rendition. You're very cute as a 5-year-old coach. So tell us about what coaching looks like at 5 years old, bossy or no bossy.
Well, you could say that I always had this thing where I would be able to see what was really going on around me and direct people in a certain way. And it's interesting because I have a daughter who is a young adult now, and she and I chuckle because when her first grade teacher told me that your daughter is very spicy, I just laughed and I thought, oh, that's really good, isn't it? Because that was me. So I've just been giving advice since I was 5 years old.
So what is the best advice you ever gave out as a 5-year-old or as but in all seriousness, thinking back to when you were really young, maybe a little ahead of your time, can you recall a piece of advice you gave out that stuck with you and stayed with you for your entire life?
Yes, if you have a toxic boss, get the heck out.
That makes a lot of sense.
You're not going to fix this person and they're going to break you if you don't leave.
Well, we're going to talk about managing up, and actually, that was something, funnily enough, I was thinking about. In fact, I'll ask it now, which is, can you fix a boss? Can you, by managing up, actually impact or affect any change?
You can certainly impact change, but you can't fix people, right? Because unless they want to be fixed, you can't help people who don't want to be helped. And fixing your boss is not something that should be on your list of things to do. You can fix the way you react to that person and how you ask for things in a way that gets you what you need. But if you think you're going to change their demeanor, their way of leading everyone, you're going to die trying.
All right, so we've got one more. And by the way, if you think you figured out which one is the lie, because there's one more to come, just go to bit.ly/2T1L_Roberta Matuson, and you could win $1 million. So that might be a lie. We don't know. You'll have to figure it out. So the third truth/lie is apparently you have run over 100 marathons. By the way, Roberta, this is how AI puts you in these situations. I often say this, which is AI cannot cure ugly. And fortunately for you, you have no problem with this. For me, I have never seen one AI rendering of me that doesn't portray me as, I don't know, with these ears, etc. So I'm hideous with a face for radio, but you look great even in, I don't know, was this marathon number 100?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been working out I have a personal trainer. So that's how I'm able to keep up my stamina and look this good.
All right. So now this one, I think you will be able to tell me, which is, what was your favorite marathon of the over 100?
Boston, absolutely Boston. Running in your hometown. My family, we live around the corner from where the marathon goes by, having my family out there cheering me on. There's nothing like it in the world.
Boston strong, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a time, I remember actually, maybe it was the year after the Boston bombing, or maybe it was 2. Nike did this fantastic program or activation where, at the time, I think I had Nike Plus, the running app, or Nike, the fuel band. And it was on a Sunday, it was almost the 1-year anniversary. And for every mile that you completed and hashtagged at the end Boston Strong, they donated $1 towards the victims' families fund. I thought it was a brilliant way of a brand actually participating not in a gratuitous way, not in a self-serving way, but in a way that really felt kind of on brand. So, it's the one time this New York Yankees fan was with you 100% all the way. All right, Roberta. So now let's get into the topic at hand. I would love you to set up the concept of, suddenly in charge. Quite literally, the name. What does it mean to be suddenly in charge? And then we'll take that and riff on it and see where it takes us.
Well, this is actually the book that I wished that I had when I was suddenly in charge. I was 24 years old and went into work one day only to find out that my boss had been fired. And I did what I thought any other 24-year-old would do. I asked for her job, and I actually was given it. So I went from being an HR coordinator to director of HR overnight at the age of 24 years old. And I was able to remain in this job for 6 years until I got taken out by a wave that I never saw coming. And to be honest with you, I didn't manage up. I didn't know what it meant. I mean, I thought, okay, well, you know how to do your job. You're very good technically. This should be enough. And huge, huge error. And I just, thought, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And so I decided to, years later, put all of what I learned into this book. So half the book is on managing up. And if you flip the book over, the other half is on managing down. So it's 2 books in one.
By the way, I cannot tell you how much I love that the whole concept. When I wrote Flip the Funnel, right, it was all about turning the traditional funnel upside down. I wanted to actually publish the entire cover upside down. So you had to turn the book around in order to I wanted my reader to be a part of the solution. And good old John Wiley & Sons, we had such a fight about it. I was in Australia for a speaking engagement that I almost lost the book deal because I wouldn't back down, and eventually I did. But I love the fact that the book actually it's a prop. You're actually you're part of the action of being able to understand the two-way street of managing up and down. So
see, I used my ability to use influence, which is what I teach in this book as well, to get my publisher to figure out a way to do this, because they were not in the beginning. They were like, "You want to do what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what we need to do with this book." And this is the This is the 3rd edition. That's how well this book has sold. And as an author, I'm sure most people don't sell enough books to, they may sell 200 books. This book, probably 75,000 at least. So we're doing something right, and the flip really works. But it's not just something to make people buy the book. It really fits in well and allows people to, if their boss comes into their office and they're reading the managing up piece, they can very gently turn the book around when the boss isn't looking and pretend they're reading managing down.
Oh, I like that. It's like, by the way, are you, this certainly dates me. But are you familiar? Do you remember the concept of a boss key?
No.
Okay, so I was more of a, back in when I was growing up, a lot of the kind of adventure games. I'm embarrassed to say that the one King's Quest and Hero's Quest, and there was one called Leisure Suit Larry. I can't believe I'm even admitting that. They had a boss key, and what happened is it was like kind of Control B, and it was kind of in on the joke, because when you hit the boss key, what would happen is immediately the screen would change to spreadsheets of and they were so stupid. They were Q1, Q2, bar charts of projected revenue. So it was essentially the key that you press to make sure that your boss didn't see that you were playing games when you should have been working. So anyway, there we go. It's like the boss key, the boss man. All right. Roberta, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of being suddenly in charge. So first of all, I had someone on my show, and I think it was Vijay Pendakur, and he said something that kind of really struck me, which is the fact that one of the problems when people are promoted is that they are promoted on their performance and their KPIs as individuals. So they're being promoted into a position where now they're a manager and a leader, and they have zero experience. It's exactly your thesis, right? It's exactly the point. And so they've been promoted based on individual performance, but not necessarily on their ability or capability to manage a team. And that's part of the problem, right? Whose problem is that? Is it the individuals or is it the companies?
It's the poor people who are working for these people. It's their problem, right? I mean, I'm sure many listeners can as we're talking about this, just imagine like, oh my gosh, like what was the worst boss I ever had? And it was more than likely somebody who may not have had a lot of experience, someone who you thought, oh my gosh, I could do way better than them as the leader here. So I think who really suffers are, the average person. So I'm on a mission to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore, because, everything that I learned about management and leadership, I learned from the worst boss I ever had. And everything that she did, I said, oh no, I need to do the opposite, because I would never subject anyone to what I went through.
I mean, that's a great learning opportunity. Funnily enough, when I wrote my very first book, I actually dedicated the book to my first boss. And I said, everything you taught me, I did the opposite. And that's why I've become successful. And again, Wiley wiped that out. They just said, you can't say it, it's too negative. But we learn both ways, right? So let's talk about what how do we change it, like from an enterprise standpoint? How do we create a simple mechanism that tells companies, when you hire someone that has not managed a team into a position where they're managing a team, there's got to be more work done, more training, more development, more aptitude analysis to put them in a position to succeed? Because it's all hands on deck. It's them being successful. It's the poor people that have to report into them, and it's the company and their shareholders.
Well, when I work with my clients, because I help organizations attract and keep the best people, I tell them that they need to be very careful who they let into management, and to understand what works for their environment. Because somebody who is super successful at Microsoft, they may not be super successful at a startup. So and there are reasons why, right? So you need to figure out first and foremost what kind of leadership style works in your organization, and then look at those traits. And when you're interviewing people, do so with what I call, I do a program called Selecting for Success. And that's where you are asking questions and listening to the answers to determine if somebody has the traits that you're looking for. So it's not too often companies, use this checkbox, right? They just check off things like, oh, they have 2 to 3 years of management experience. Oh, they know our software program. Leadership is a lot more than just ticking off things in the boxes here.
I really like that. And just to kind of bring that home, is that not everyone, I mean, there are a whole bunch of truisms. One is, you can be a great leader and a poor manager. You can be a great manager and a poor leader. You can succeed in spite of your leadership style if you have a framework. But mainly the point that I want to bounce back to you is, not everyone is cut out to be a leader or a manager. And sometimes people are actually honest enough to say, I don't want to be a part of this team. This isn't for me. But I think what we've done is we've created a culture where it's being promoted into management and leadership, which is a sign of status and a sign of seniority. But the third part is still the glaring omission, which is with power comes responsibility, right? And not everyone wants that.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think companies are going to be in for a great awakening. If you look at the data, Gen Z, many people that are part of Gen Z, which is the latest generation to enter the workforce, and they're in there in large numbers, many of them do not want to be in management. And, you know, sometimes you're put in a position where nobody even asks, do you want this job? It's like, you know, hey, here you are, we're promoting you to a manager, not, well, are you interested in management? Would you like to learn how to be a leader? Like, oh no, here you go. And it's hard for people sometimes to say, this isn't what I signed up for. And they feel like if they don't take these jobs, they're not going to have a job. So I think the first question that companies should be asking people is around, are you even interested in being a leader at some point? And if so, let's get you ready.
I mean, it makes so much sense. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself that there should be two career tracks in every company. One is the individual, and the other one is the team, or not the team, but the management track. And you should be able to choose and go as high as you possibly can. But of course, there is a ceiling. There is a cap, which is at some point. I mean, you're never going to become the CEO of a company if you can't manage or won't manage. But I think I think what you're saying is,
wait a minute. We got CEOs of companies who cannot manage, so I think we have.
I know. I realize as I was saying it as well. You know, so it's a bit of a mess. But ultimately, if we want to talent maximize or talent, you know, or resurrect talent, we've got to figure out better ways. But let's flip it on its head for a second, and let's talk about managing up. Is it a strategy, or is it about survival? You know, this idea of being able to manage up in order to make sure, I mean, something that we were talking about before, that when the chop comes, you know, you're on the right side of those layoffs.
Well, I mean, it's both, right? I mean, you have to be strategic in your career. I think the biggest mistake that people make is thinking that their work will speak for itself. And if you look at like the show American Idol, the people who in the end did the best, they didn't really, they didn't win. They were runners up, and they were able to toot their horn so loudly that nobody was able to ignore them. And what happens in organizations oftentimes is that people think, well, I'm doing great work, my boss is going to notice, but you know what? Your boss is managing 10, 15, 20 other people who look just like you, and they may not remember what you did. So you have to be on your own campaign. You have to brand yourself so that you're memorable.
I mean, dare I use the word of, you know, kissing, you know what, or this idea of sucking up to your boss? I mean, is that what it's come to?
No, it is not. Managing up is not sucking up to your boss. It's using, you know, it's having conversations with your boss so that you can get the resources you need to make your people successful and to be successful as well. It is not kissing the ring.
So it's not bending the knee or kissing the ring. What do you do, though, in an organization when there is so much dysfunction and politics and lack of trust that other people are, you know, almost like this idea of the clambering, this idea of this, you know, coveting of the boss, this monopolizing their time? How do you stand out, and how do you differentiate? How do you make sure that you're building relationships, and making sure your work is represented when around you is all of this chaos?
Well, first, there are a couple of things. First, you have to decide, is this the right environment for you? And do you want to stay there? Because it sounds a little bit crazy to me. But let's say we're talking about right now where there aren't a lot of job opportunities. at least it doesn't feel that way. And you feel like, well, I have to stay. Like, I don't want to be last one in, first one out at my next company. And so you have to become a person of interest. You have to be somebody that people want to be around. And you have to let your boss know that you have other skills besides, being able to code all day or whatever. And you become a person of interest by getting out of the office and doing interesting things. And, as you and I know, back in the day, golf was where, you go out golfing with the boss, and that's how you get their ear. Well, today there are other ways. You can find out what is in the heart of your boss as far as volunteer organizations, and get out there and be visible. If your boss is playing pickleball and you don't know a thing about it, you can go learn about it and maybe play a few games with them. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do. But what you can't do and shouldn't do is to just sit back and say, oh, well, I'm like, be the wallpaper. That's not going to help you.
I love this. Please look out for Roberta Matuson's new book, wherever books are sold, called Person of Interest. I always like to do that. I like to come up with the next book for my guests.
Oh my gosh, that'd be book number 8. I don't know. You do.
Yeah, I'm not writing it, so. But I love it as well because they talk about the idea of a person of interest is someone who they're like, we like this person for a crime, for a, it's cops might call a person of interest. But I like it because I was thinking person of interest in terms of being an interesting person in the workplace. And you're talking about actually outside of the workplace, actually looking to create a relationship or forge some kind of a connection outside. I still think, though, that must be tough for a subordinate. That must be tough for someone who's junior to and brave and courageous to want to actually reach out without it also being perceived by the boss as sucking up or by their colleagues as being political. So it seems like it could be a catch-22.
Well, first of all, the catch-22 is the scenario you set up where you're in this highly dysfunctional organization, right? So if you're in an organization that's not dysfunctional, there are other ways to capture the attention of your boss that don't require going outside of the organization. And, that's by making sure that you keep your own records of the work that you've done. And in most situations, if you can monetize it, and say, for example, I was able to prevent our number one customer from leaving, which saved our organization over $2 million in revenue this year, and write that down so that when it's review time, you give your boss a self-evaluation before he or she asks, and you note all of these great things that you've done and remind them, because again, they are not going to remember. Then you start to promote yourself, but it's not in an obnoxious way, and your coworkers don't know that you're doing it. And who cares what your coworkers think, because they're looking at you thinking, oh, I wish I could be like him or her. So that's my theory.
I absolutely love that idea. I jotted down 3 words: real-time resume. So it's almost like you're writing your resume for one day when you've left the company, but you're actually now already starting to, in real time, say, here were my accomplishments when I was there. So it's proactive, it's strategic, it's a real, I think, pragmatic tip. And so I hope people that are watching or listening pick that up. And by the way, if you don't do it, you're going to forget. You're going to forget about those wins. And all the things that you accomplished. So yeah, that's awesome. So here's another thing that you can do. Talk about setting this up, Roberta. If people want to know what you did last week, is you could send, I don't know, an email saying, please reply to this email with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week and CC your manager. Please do not send any classified information, links, or attachments. How's this in terms of smart strategies for a boss to send out or an employee to send back to their boss?
Well, I like your idea of doing this for yourself. meaning thinking about the 5 things or the 2 or 3 things that you accomplished last week or last month, and keeping a log of that for yourself, and then using it when you need to. When I heard that was going on in the government and then other companies started to follow suit, my response was, are you kidding me? Would you even think about sending such an email to your spouse or your partner? Would you ask them this? And if so, how do you think that they would feel? And my response in my head was, my guess is that they would feel disrespected. So I don't think this is a great way to lead in an organization of any kind. And I would definitely, if I were coaching any of your listeners or anyone watching today, I would say, do not, and I repeat, do not do this. This is not good.
Oh, I'm way ahead of you. I'm now firing off an email as we speak to my wife to basically ask her what are the 5 things she did for me lately. I got a feeling I'm going to be calling up an attorney very soon. This is not going to end well for me.
No, this is not.
Well, let's, there is a lot to actually uncover as we peel back the onion, Roberta. I mean, we're both coaches, and we both, we've probably both seen some of the Gallup data that talks about actively disengaged employees or just disengaged employees, or the fact that many employees don't even know how what they do connects back and helps the firm's overall goals. So there's definitely disconnects as you go deeper and deeper and deeper. Do employees can they even articulate, even if it were a proactive and a positive thing, are they even in a position to answer that question?
Well, I would hope so, because I would hope that their boss had given them enough direction so that they would know exactly what the expectations were, so that they would be able to say, well, based on what you've asked me to accomplish here are 5 things that I did last week that is helping, us both move towards these objectives.
Right. So again, it always comes back to the boss, right? Which is, if you set them up to succeed, great. But if not, it becomes almost like a circular type of a vicious cycle instead of a virtuous one, because I can, I sent 5 emails, I, cleaned out my trash can, as opposed to understanding the tasks that I performed and how they can impact the bottom line or the key measurables. And I think that's the whole point. You need a framework in place in order to be able to even answer that question.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, but it starts with the boss. So I'll give you an example, and I write about this in Suddenly in Charge. I had a boss, and she might be the one that I was talking about, like the worst boss ever, who said to me, as I was sitting there, and I can picture being in her office at this very moment, she said the following: Roberta, you are not meeting my expectations. However, I'm not sure I ever told you what they were. Mic drop. I thought to myself, this is really interesting. She went to Harvard. Maybe they taught mind reading at Harvard. I only went to Northeastern University. We didn't get that course. We were too busy working our co-op jobs, to pay tuition. So, how was I supposed to read her mind? And to me, that was just the craziest thing that anyone had ever said to me. So if you're a boss and you're listening to this and are watching this and you're thinking, I don't understand, people, they're not doing what I need them to do, I'd like you to step back and think about, have you told them what you want them to do? Have you been specific and not just said, go out and get more sales? What does that mean?
Yeah, it has uncovered this inconvenient truth that we, if we say we as management or leadership, haven't done perhaps even remotely a good enough job in terms of creating clear, unambiguous lines of communication and expectations with our employees. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this, but I always find a quote for my guests. And this is the quote that I found for you. And I will not say that that's who said it. So I'm not even going to pronounce it. But the quote is a good one. You were hired because you met expectations. You will be promoted if you can exceed them.
Or if you know the right people.
Well, let's hope that it's not that political as well.
Oh, you and I know. You and I have been in the corporate world long enough that we can
That's
have
why
an
I'm not in the corporate world.
Exactly, that we can have an honest conversation and say some, and that's this whole thing, right? If you're not known, let me give you an example. I was just working with a senior leader at a pharmaceutical company, and her division was being closed, and she had to find another position, or she would lose a ton of money in her retirement because she was coming close to retirement age. And many times she would get through these interviews and the team would sit down, the executive team, and they're like, oh yeah, we know the name, we just don't know much about her. And then the job would go to someone else, somebody who they knew a lot about and had seen in action. And so our work together over the time that we had an engagement going was for her to be somebody who was memorable and for people to know who she was. So when she walked into these interviews, people would be like, oh my gosh, it'd be crazy not to give her this job. We know so much about her and we know what she can do.
I mean, this comes back to person of interest as well. Be memorable for all the right reasons. Let's play a little word game here, which is, I'm thinking if I was to add one more line to this quote, you were hired because you met expectations. You will be promoted if you can exceed them. You will keep your job in a round of layoffs if, or because what? Blank with respect to expectations.
Because you're adding value every day.
All right. Can I play the game too?
Sure.
How about this one? This one's going right back to you. You are hired because you met expectations. You will be promoted if you can exceed them. You will be kept in a round of layoffs and not let go if you manage them.
Yeah, I like that.
And that goes back to the idea of managing up and managing down. Yeah, I was thinking this is a really, really good framework to help people understand. I want to go back just for a second to our friend Elon and the Department of Government Efficiency. I can't believe I'm even saying that. What happens in a scenario where a boss says, please reply to the email with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week and CC your manager, and you said, absolutely, and I'd like my manager to send me an email with approximately 5 bullets of what he or she accomplished last week and CC me. Is that fair? Fair game?
I think you should have your resume ready to go.
Damn it, that's not fair. That is not fair.
Oh, business is not fair. You and I both know that. If it were fair, like when there was a layoff, the people who weren't performing would be the first to go. We know that's not the case. That doesn't always happen. There's always people who are left and people are like, why are they still here? So if you think that life is going to be fair, especially in business, then I don't know what to tell you. Don't read my book because you got to go in with an open mind here and be realistic.
So your book, I mean, it's not a fairy tale. It's not a feel-good book. It's actually like it's very, brass tacks, pragmatic in terms of saying this is in a way a survival guide. It's a survival to thrival guide. So let's talk about what are the best ways to manage up and maybe what are the most dangerous or worst ways to manage up?
Well, I'd like to start with the worst ways.
Sure.
I think the worst ways are to be inauthentic, right? And you don't have to be inauthentic to manage up. We have people who are introverts. There are different ways to gain attention. There are different ways to contribute than the extroverts who like to some of them take all the air out of the room and don't give you a chance to speak. So I think you have to first recognize that there are different ways to accomplish this. And for some people, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but with practice, and after you read the book or buy the audio version of the book, listening to that, while you're on your Peloton or whatever, I think that you'll see that there are pieces that you can adapt that are authentic to you. When I coach people, I never try to change who they are. Like, that is not how this works. It's just, how do we help you become a better version of yourself?
All right. So inauthentic. That's let's go with another one. What is a huge mistake that people might make when attempting to manage up?
Well, another mistake that people might make when attempting to manage up is to give up too early. Oh, I tried this and it didn't work. What did you do? Well, I tried this once. Okay. Now what, right? Like, okay, we'll try it again in a different way. It's like I use this framework when I teach people how to use influencing skills. And, the first time you ask for something, you might say, I'm wondering if you would, right? And so they don't do what you need done. And then the next time you might say, I'd like you to. And then they still don't do it. And then the next time you say, I need you to. And you just elevate the request. And, there's more to it. There's a lot more to the request. But you have to change your language. You have to change your strategy. You don't give up after the first time. I mean, it sounds like you have kids. I mean, the first time you asked them to put their toys away and they didn't, did you give up? No, I'm sure you elevated your voice and your request, and then you figured out a way to frame it in a way that would be in their best interest. So you have to, practice. None of this, you can't just read a book and learn how to do this. You have to practice and apply what you learn. And that's why it's so great to have a coach, right? Somebody you can bounce things off of and say, well, how about if I frame it like this? Like, okay, that's a good idea if you want to lose your job.
I definitely, I'll add something as well, which is maybe one of the biggest mistakes that people make when managing up is not to manage up. Is just because that builds on what you said, which is the idea of not making the effort, not trying, giving up too soon. I do feel, and yes, I'm expecting that to be on my wife's email she sends of the 5 things. She picked up the toys and put them back. Just kidding. But I do have, I have a 23-year-old daughter, and she's in the working world. And I think of her generation, and I think of the savviness or the lack thereof, this idea of even when we look at what I call the vanillaization of our kids today, no one wanting to stick their neck out or stand out, that they do want to just wallflower and blend into the background. And I think this really feels like an important concept for an entire generation to start reading and being a little bit more savvy. Let's call it politically savvy instead of political when it comes to this idea of understanding what it takes to succeed in the workplace. Because, and I will say, last point there, Roberta, is like, you and I were used to the 65 to 80 hour weeks. We're used to, the devil wears Prada. For us, this is the way it is, or the way it was, which is the boss. We shouldn't, but we fear the boss, and we work our asses off in order to be able to stay up to speed, let alone get ahead. That's how you have to get ahead, is to be ruthless and intense, and I almost feel like we've done a full 180, and the pendulum must swing back.
Well, I have a 25-year-old son or 26, who I've written 7 books, who picked up Suddenly in Charge and read a chapter, which was huge. And he told me he thought it was very well written, which was another huge win, and used it just before he was going in to have a discussion about a raise with his boss. So, you know, I don't want to see us ever go back to the Devil Wears Prada days, you know, and I have 2 Gen Z kids, and I think, you know, it's a different world. And I think that I would rather they learn how to work within the confines that they're in, not the confines that we are. I mean, if my son or daughter had a boss like I had, I would have told him to friggin' get the heck out of there and quit. Like, nobody needs to be abused. I mean, I literally had an abusive boss. I could have sued her for a number of things. I could have won. I just didn't want to spend my life like in a lawsuit. So, but I wouldn't encourage my kids to just put up with it and get strong and tough. That's just me. But I do think that, you know, that there are ways that you can learn to have a stronger relationship with the people above you in the organization, and do it in a way that doesn't tear your soul apart.
Well, let's end on a high and on a positive note, which is, let's talk about being a great boss. What does a boss have to do to keep, to nurture, to engage, to activate talent, and now managing down, and also recognizing that we see generational shifts where people are going to leave the company. They're not going to be loyal. They're not going to be lifers. So how does one become a great boss, manage down, and do one's best to keep talent happy and at the firm?
I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to find a coach and find somebody who can do a 360 for you, where you get feedback from all around so that you can understand what you're doing that's getting in your way. Because we're all doing things that get in our way, and we keep doing them, and then we wonder why we have the same results, which aren't favorable. And so, you know, that may be, gee, you know, I've spoken to 10 people and 8 of them think you're a micromanager. And today, like, autonomy is like one of the biggest things that people are looking for in their, you know, in their work environment. It could be that you're speaking to people in a tone that doesn't work for them. Like, there's a lot of things. You and I aren't going to be able to figure this out today, but if you can get real honest with yourself and get the data you need to figure out, where do I need to double down to be better, and what do I need to stop doing, I think that will be a place where you will be what I call the magnetic leader. And that's someone who attracts top talent no matter where they go.
Please look out for Roberta Matuson's 9th book called Boss of Interest. I was just thinking, same thing, right? Right. Just hold up the mirror. Be a boss of interest as well, not just a person of interest. Roberta, we got about 90 seconds left before I turn into a pumpkin. Actually, it's my show, so I can do what I want. But I'm curious as to where you see the role of AI playing, especially when it comes to, you know, I don't know, whether it's OKRs or KPIs, performance, etc. Will AI kind of do all the work for us? Where does AI play into this managing up, managing down ecosystem?
Well, I think AI will, you know, enable us to offload some of the tasks that we're doing so that we can focus on the interpersonal relationships, which is really where things matter, right? Whether those are relationships with customers, relationships with your boss, relationships with your coworkers. You know, when you're not so busy, you know, crunching numbers that can easily be done by AI, you'll have more time to have these conversations.
Well, the book is called Suddenly in Charge. I keep on thinking of Suddenly Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors, but this book is not a horror. You will be a horror as a boss if you don't figure out how to manage down. See, I just had to bring it back. The book is called Suddenly in Charge, Managing Up, Managing Down, Succeeding all around. If you want to find out more about her executive coaching services or hire her for a keynote, go to Matuson Consulting, but spell it Madison Consulting phonetically, especially if you're listening to the audio. You can follow Roberta on X at Matuson, spelt Madison. I'm just, phonetically doing it. But that's so cool that you have your last name. Like, I wish I had Jaffe on X. Actually, I don't wish I was on X anymore, but that's another story for another day. And of course, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. Roberta, this topic is, as I said, near and dear to my heart. It's so important. It's a generational imperative, one might say. As we were saying, just make sure that you keep publishing books at least more than 2 months away from any global pandemic.
I will do that.
And final word, of course, goes to Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
So he's managing up. We'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.